Welcome to the DoD Contract Podcast, where we talk with businesses and subject matter experts that are selling to the U.S. government and the Department of Defense. We discuss strategies and tactics that are working for real businesses, as well as give you a real sense of how your tax dollars are at work with these small business contracts in particular. I'm Richard Howard, owner of DoDContract.com. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Air Force and former acquisitions officer for the Department of Defense. Now, quick question for you before we get into today's episode. Is there something you want to see on the show that I haven't covered? Is there a business that you'd like us to interview that you think would be a good guest, a technology area or industry that we haven't covered that may be involved with government procurement? If so, just leave your thoughts in the recommendations section. If you're listening to the podcast or if you're on YouTube, leave a comment and we'll take those. And this is how we actually develop a lot of our episodes. So your comments and suggestions mean a lot to me and to the other people that work on the podcast. Today we have a great episode. My guest is Jacob Hill. He's the owner and founder of GRC Academy. Now, GRC Academy trains and researches governance, risk, and compliance. And they have courses which are very, I would say, critical for any business that's selling to the government. He covers things like CMMC and NIST 800-171. If you don't know what those are, just listen to the episode. But basically, I would say I would put you in two different tiers. If you are selling anything, if your company does anything that would connect to a network, if you have a software or a piece of equipment, anything that's going to connect to a government equipment, I would put you in the first tier category, although CMMC can apply to businesses that are more involved than that. This is a great episode because he's really good at explaining what you need to know about things like CMMC. We touch on other things like FedRAMP and whatnot, but I think this is going to be a good episode for all business owners to listen to. Now, Jacob is also going to be giving us a course that we're going to put in the DoD Contract Academy. So anyone that's in that is going to get a little preview of what CMMC is. I think that's going to be really good. Now on to our sponsor for today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Govly. Now, Govly is a platform that you could subscribe to online. There are a lot of different platforms you can go to look for opportunities, but Govly is extremely unique. And this is one of the reasons that I've taken them on and they are working with me. You can also listen to the episode I did with the founder of Govly, which was a few episodes back. I'm going to read you a review of one of the people using Govly, and then we can go from there. And this is on the main page of their website. Govly is the best software tool in the federal government contracting space. They ingest several of the large government contracts procurement, requests for quotes, in the IT space, along with their automated systems, which makes your company's life easier when submitting bidding. What this tool does, the reason it's so unique is that they're not putting in front of you just all of the solicitations that you'd see on a SAM.gov or another bid matching tool, or GovWin IQ, or, you pick the tool. What they're doing is they have primes that own these larger contract vehicles. And a lot of the opportunities that are set aside for these contract vehicles aren't going to come out publicly on a SAM.gov. They just go to the primes. Same thing with GSA. So a lot of the primes are in Govly and they need subcontractors to work for them. So they make these opportunities available within Govly. And then you can see them as a small business. So if subcontracting is part of your approach to selling to the government, and it is for most businesses, even the large businesses, then Govly is a very unique tool that can make you aware of opportunities you wouldn't be aware of before. Now, if you would like to investigate further, you can go to the website, govly.com. Tell them you heard about us on DoDContract.com. You can also reach out to me through our DoDContract.com website, and we can put you in touch with the right people there. All right, on to today's episode. Cool. All right. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this week to DoD Contract Academy. Today, I'm with Jacob Hill. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you? Thank you for having me on.
No, thanks for coming on, man. So I think we first met on LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken, right? Because, we were
Yes.
going back and forth. We have some common friends, and Corn Wise is one of them. She was on the program, and I'll talk about maybe how she's involved or was involved, because it looked like she peer reviewed some of your work.
Yes.
But that's really how we kind of started talking, and we also started talking about how you might be able to provide. We have an academy at DoD, so DoD Contract Academy is the podcast. We also have an academy for people interested in selling to the government and kind of working at it. And mainly we're doing things like more high-end services, I guess you could say, done with you and done for you. But
right,
kind of the initial piece with the kids in there. And I know we've talked about how you can help with some of the courses and some of the things that, especially cybersecurity and IT and technology-focused companies, which is really our sweet spot. It's I would say that's mainly the people that you're going to hear us interviewing. Not always, but a lot of the companies on the podcast are in that space. So why don't you, I'm going to jump off my high horse. Why don't you tell us what you do first? We'll start off with what you do, kind of what your specialty is, and then we'll start, maybe digging in from there.
Yeah, sure, certainly. So I've launched a platform about 3 months ago. It is a side hustle. I'll tell you about that first. It's a GRC Academy, and I saw a gap basically that needed to be filled. The DoD and what's known as the CyberAB and their CACO, which is their training organization for CMMC, has been focused in on building out the ecosystem of consultants and assessors, but there hasn't been as much focus on businesses and getting them, a centralized spot of information that is easily accessible and understandable. There's a lot of great information that many companies are putting out. The DoD puts out great information as well. However, not everyone has that background, right?
Sure.
And not everybody understands cybersecurity, compliance. And so I built this course to provide an overview and give folks a great understanding of CMMC, NIST 800-171, the contractual requirements, the whole bit. So that they can make informed decisions and go from there. It does not replace the need if a company is very small and they don't have an IT guy, a cybersecurity guy. It doesn't replace that need, but it will give them a solid point so that they're not fully reliant and following blindly, their consultant, and they can understand what's going on.
Sure. We're going to dig into that too. I think the cybersecurity and IT companies are probably going to get this to some extent, right? Because that's their, they should, right? That's their bread and butter. But companies that are maybe like SaaS companies that aren't necessarily focused in something like cybersecurity are really going to need to pay attention to this, because there are a lot of things that you need to understand when you're selling to the government, when you're selling to the DoD, when you're trying to connect to a network. There are a lot of, and we've covered it a little bit on some episodes. I try not to make that the focus, but on this episode, I think we really want to dive into that. But before we get there, why don't we learn a little bit more about you? Like, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah.
Did you learn all this?
Yes. Well, I was actually homeschooled back in the day. And then I went to community college, transferred into George Mason University from there. And I got my bachelor's in IT back in 2012 or something like that. And I worked through most of my college. I was able to get a part-time position doing IT help desk work when I was the fresh young age of 18. And
where was that?
It was, I'm based out of Virginia, and that's where I grew up. And it was at a company called EG&G Technical Services. Back in the day, they were acquired by URS. Now they're acquired by AECom, if I recall correctly. I haven't kept up with history. There could have been another acquisition since then.
It's hard to track all of the files, isn't it?
Yes. But my father, he was actually an IT, like a LAN administrator over there. And that's how I got my foot in the door, which was awesome. So thanks, Dad. But from there, I was actually supporting a program called MRAP, which no doubt you're familiar with, and very interesting program, and met a lot of people. So that what
is MRAP for the audience?
It's the mine resistant, and I'm blanking out on the A. And basically, it was meant to counter the IED threat that our troops were facing back in those wars, and it was very successful. Interesting program. And if I can get the name for you here.
It's mine resistant, ambush protected.
Yes, mine resistant, ambush protected. Yeah, it was a very interesting program to support. Lots of interesting folks working on that program. And then I moved over to a IT position working on base and over at Marine Corps Systems Command, supporting those folks. And again, met a lot of really interesting people.
What base was that at?
It was Marine Corps base Quantico.
Okay, so you're at Quantico. All right.
Yes.
I'm an Air Force guy, so like the Marine bases and the Navy and Army, like I always have to kind of dig in there. So
right. Yeah, but from there, I actually jumped onto the government position for about 5 years. And
okay, cool. So you were a GS at that point.
Yes.
And it happens like this a lot, where you'll start off as a contractor, and you know, it's not a podcast necessarily about being a government employee, but I do get a lot of questions about over the years about individuals that are looking to work for the government. So I mean, that is an interest area for some people, and a lot of the ways they get into it is they start off as a contractor and then they transition over to that GS. Well, how did you find that transition, and kind of maybe really quickly, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it?
Yeah, well, the first position, the culture there was probably quite toxic. So when I came in, they were losing people left and right, which actually was great for me because I'm the young, hungry guy, energetic guy, and you have all these folks who are probably disengaged or maybe actively disengaged.
Yep,
and so I got to do a lot of interesting things in that first position. I was able to be a team lead over a team of procurement analysts. We were working on a program called MCHS, the Marine Corps Common Hardware Suite, and then McSelms, which is the software piece. And I think, if I recall right, that was just for the tactical folks. And then I was able to be a project officer in the Corps for a short time.
Okay.
So that was very interesting.
But could you tell the audience, what is a Corps? What does that mean?
Yeah, contracting officer representative. So you are basically the middleman, or the middle person between the contractor and the contracting officer.
Okay. And sometimes a Corps is, and this may have been your experience, when you hear about the larger contracting vehicles, which I've covered on some of the episodes on this show, like if you think of a NASA SOUP, which is a big one, right? Or just maybe an IDIQ, a 3 to 5 year IDIQ that you can make orders off of for multiple businesses. There's going to be a Corps that is managing a lot of the purchases, I guess you could say, with that contract vehicle. Now, were you involved with anything like that, or?
I was not in that perspective because it was already an operating program. It was for a web application, which had already been going on. Although I will say is that the handover that I received from the previous Corps and project officer, because it was combined, that was the same thing for me, was not great.
Yeah. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. She actually told me she deleted everything. So
my word.
Yeah.
That's a job that I know. Well, everyone I knew in the government did not want that job, because you don't get paid more if you're in the Corps. Often is an additional responsibility.
Yes.
Right. So, and it is a lot of work, and you got to get it right.
Yes.
So, but it's a great learning experience, right?
Oh, I mean, it was
doing that job, especially if you're a little bit younger. That's great because you have it in your background now, and you kind of understand it. So good. Okay. So you had that. What happened next?
Yeah. So from there, and actually I was able to work with a source selection board and go through that process. Is where a SharePoint back in the day, SharePoint on-prem activity. So that was really interesting.
How long was that? How long did it take you to go through that process?
Yeah, it wasn't very long. It was maybe a week or two.
That's pretty fast.
It wasn't long. Yes, it was very fast. Because
how big was the contract?
Maybe it was less than $2 million.
Okay.
It was maybe less than $1 million.
So it's a smaller contract.
Yes.
Can you tell everyone, what does that process look like? Because I talk a lot about how to sell to the government on this podcast, right? We talk a lot about what you have to do up to the point of submitting the proposal, and maybe how important it is to get the proposal right.
Yeah.
But we don't cover a lot of how does the government actually decide what company wins, right? So,
Yeah.
because often I'll hear, hey, government contracts are rigged, right? And
Yeah.
I've even said, I'm like, I usually knew what company I wanted to hire, the program manager, but I didn't always get to hire that company. And one of the reasons for that, well, there's lots of regulations and laws that prevent you from just hiring anybody. Right?
Yes.
But one of the things that happens after you submit the proposals is often that's going to go to a review team and they might not be involved with any of the conversations the program managers had. And the program manager is probably not on that review team at all. Maybe he is, but probably not, or she.
Yeah.
So now what does that look like? So you get a bunch of proposals in, and now you have to review them?
Yes, that's right. So essentially, I don't remember the criteria for that particular that contract, but I don't think it was lowest price technically acceptable, which the government was using for quite a while. I don't know if they still are. Hopefully,
every now and then. I mean, it just depends, right? Yeah, I was never a fan of that, and most people weren't. But okay, so but it was not lowest price technically acceptable, and so now you're on this team that has to review, and it takes I mean, a couple $1 million contracts. Not a big contract for the government. So I've seen these teams take months, right, on the big contracts. But so it's kind of lucky that you got the experience that you did on this 1 week endeavor, right? 1 or 2 week endeavor. So what kind of things happen while you're on that team? So, and yeah, don't talk about the specifics, but like you get a bunch of contracts. Are you given a set of rules that you have to follow or grading criteria?
Yes, we were given rules. We were given grading criteria. And again, I don't remember the exact criteria.
Yeah.
But what was interesting about that one is we were looking at the different proposals, and we saw the same names on them, the same personnel on them for about three of the proposals.
Did any of those win?
I think they may have, yes.
Okay.
And what was funny is that they weren't, you kind of expect if you have the same names that they'd be real similar, but one didn't meet the requirements that we were asking for. It was pretty rough. Yeah. And but two of them were pretty similar. And I think another one, maybe there were two others that were different from that. I can't recall exactly who won, but I thought that was pretty interesting. Just the teaming that goes on. It's like somebody's going to win.
Especially as a subcontractor, right? Like you have now I guess you could do it either way, but if you're a subcontractor, a lot of subs will partner with a couple different primes. And so it gives them a couple different opportunities to win, right? And especially if you're this, I guess, for anyone that's subbing a lot, and we're going to do some episodes that go more in depth on subcontracting and teaming. But typically, the prime is the one that is going to write that proposal, and all proposal writers are not equal, as you saw, right? So, so maybe you have one sub that is partnered with 3 different primes, and one of the primes just was winging it and just put in a crappy proposal, didn't do a compliance matrix, didn't do all the things you're supposed to, and then the other 2 maybe did better. Okay, so cool. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but I think that's a really interesting experience, and a nice little added bonus for those that thought this was all going to be about CMMC and cybersecurity. So cool. Okay, so moving on from there, so you got some great experience.
Yeah. So from there, I went over into what was called the Certification Authority's office. And back then it was under DIACAP. That was the DoD's authorization process, how you get an ATO on the government network.
What does that stand for?
An authorization to operate.
Okay. And why do you need that?
Yeah, you definitely need that.
So I said, why do you need that?
Oh, I see. Got it.
Yep.
So
we're just explaining to people that don't understand the acronyms, or maybe, hey, why do I need an approval to operate?
Yeah, that's right. So on the government's network, if you want to bring anything onto the operational side, it has to go through a risk assessment. The government wants to understand number one, what is it that you're bringing on? What are the pieces and parts of that? What are the vulnerabilities? And the ultimate output of that, they have a number of security controls as well that you have to account for. And the output of that is, part of this is a risk assessment that happens by the certifying authority that was under DIACAP, and then they route it to the designated authorization official, if I recall correctly. He was calling himself the authorizing official, which is an RMF term back then. So we didn't really use the term DAA. But anyway, we routed all of the Marine Corps Systems Command ATO packages up for the final risk decision. And then from there, ideally, they would get their ATO and be able to operate.
Right. Doesn't always happen in a, the way you describe it sounds very logical, streamlined. I can tell you that my experience in the Air Force as a program manager with ATO it was one of my biggest areas of consternation. Not because I didn't think we needed it. You definitely need it. But sometimes it would be so painstaking and take so long to get an ATO.
Yes.
For a system that we put out that already takes a long time just to put somebody on contract and build whatever you're building or get the software. Then you can add 6 months, a year, longer than that, just to go through this process to get an approval to operate. It can be very frustrating.
Oh, yes. And then you have different reviewers and they might get their hands on it at certain points. And one might say, well, no, one might say this is okay. But the other guy might say, well, no, you need to go back.
Yeah. Some of that is subjective,
It is.
And varies wildly from one agency to another, not to mention within the same agency, because everyone's different, right? Everyone has their own peccadillos, things they
right.
Cool. Well, and so are you going through a list of because you hand that ATO package up, right? But you're going through this risk assessment. So that's a list of controls that you're looking at and making sure that, does that sound accurate or is it a little bit different?
So you have a few things. One is the list of controls that the program office says, okay, this is how we believe we've implemented. This is what we've inherited. This is what is non-applicable to us. To our system. So you have to evaluate that. And then there's the technical piece where they go through these, what are called STIGs, Security Technical Implementation Guides from DISA. And they will, basically it's a set of configuration guidance. They have a lot of STIGs for Windows, for databases, for Linux, for web servers, for printers. The list goes on and on.
Right.
So whatever your system is based, whatever the pieces and parts of your system are, you'll apply a set of STIGs. And so we review those also. The STIGs have a severity category. So Cat 1 is very, very critical. Cat 2 is, moderate, medium. Cat 3 is what is called low. And so the severities do matter. And a STIG check could be as simple as, well, this registry key needs to be set to 0 to disable Bluetooth or something like that.
Right.
And sometimes STIGs can have hundreds of checks. So it's very involved.
So are you going through this process for software suites that want to get added? Are you going through this process is it for equipment? Typically, what were you checking?
Yeah. So really, we were relying. Let me back up a little bit. We kind of reference their software list, and number one, we want to make sure, okay, well, you have this list of software, and okay, did you apply this in that STIG? Because if they missed it, they have to go back. And ideally you want to catch that up front so they don't have to go rework.
Right.
But yeah, so we look at that software list and that tells us what STIGs they should be applying, which is kind of subjective as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's another level of subjectivity. Does that answer the question?
No, it did. Absolutely.
Okay.
So you're learning a lot. You're getting some great experience there, right? Okay.
Yes.
So what happens next in your career? You're a government civilian for, I think you said 5 years.
Yes. Yeah. And actually when I came in, I was quite fresh, quite new into cybersecurity. So I wasn't the guy doing the assessments at that point. I was kind of led into that. I was doing some SharePoint work, building some tools, some dashboards and stuff like that while I kind of absorbed the information, but after that, I went over into, I decided that the money wasn't good enough in the government and I jumped out back into, private defense contractor. And I was
not surprising. In fact,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
were at God, what was it? Was it DOTUS? I was listening to the chief information officers from this. So the time of this recording is
Mhm.
what is it? March 2023. So DOTUS in December of 2022. The chief information officers from just about all of the services. I think there was one where we didn't have a CIO or somebody else, but one thing
Yeah.
they all agreed on is a serious problem that they were having is training and keeping personnel in the military services
Yeah.
that actually understand cybersecurity and data management.
Yes.
Because once they get, somebody to a certain level of training, whether we're talking about something like CISP or, the different certifications you have, or just training them so they understand,
Hmm.
they do exactly what you did, right? Which
Yeah.
is, look, the government can't compete with what a company is going to pay somebody
Yeah.
with that knowledge. They just can't. So what's happening is a lot of them are exiting, and then
Yeah.
now the government has a problem. How do we maintain people that actually have this knowledge base? So sounds like you added to that problem. And but by the way, don't blame you at all. So
Yeah.
you spent 5 years there. You served the country. You were providing value, and you're still doing that just from a different angle. So you go
Yes.
to the defense contracting route after that.
Yes. Yeah, and I was working on a program had to do with missiles, which was awesome. And we had a program that was transitioning from DICAP to what's called Risk Management Framework, which is RMF. Yes, yes. And that's a federal standard. The DoD was doing their own thing under DICAP, and now they're acclimating to the federal NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology standard for cybersecurity.
What year was this?
That was 2015.
Okay. Copy. All right.
Yes.
Let's keep going, man. So what happens in
Yeah.
2016, 17, 18?
Yeah. So I spent some time over there, learned a good bit about RMF and all the security controls. And with RMF, I don't remember so much under DICAP, but RMF, depending on the categorization of your system, you could have several hundred security controls. So
Sure.
it's very stringent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge pain in the ass, for lack of a better term. And anyone involved with that, like, I give them tremendous amount of credit because they have a job to do that is very difficult. And it's often competing with what leadership wants on the government side, right? Because we want the thing that we bought that's going to help the warfighter to be approved and used as fast as possible. But that process can be a frustratingly slow endeavor. And the government, and this may lead to what we're going to be talking about here, the government knew that we needed to give industry away. I say we, like I'm still in the Air Force. I'm not. Right. So, but the government does and is trying right now. They have a variety of things they're doing to give industry away to develop their software suites. So they are taking all of this into account, which will then make it faster, in theory, to get these ATOs and get onto systems. So, and I think we're going to probably talk about some of those, but I don't want to take the words out of your mouth. So let's keep going here. So we've got a frustrating RMF NIST process.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was a very big program, so I had to work with a lot of different folks to get the answers I needed. But very interesting for sure. Good. And then I moved from that position on to my current company, which is my day job. And I am now the director of cyber operations. I came into the company to work on a enterprise deployment of a security solution for the Marine Corps, back to the Marine Corps. Yep. And got their ATO for them. And, that was my first RMF ATO.
No small feat, by the way.
No. Yeah. It just a nominal small fee, right? Yes. And then after that contract, I shifted into the corporate side. So there is something called NIST 800-171. And for several years, that's what I've been focused on. I've shifted a little bit here and there to some customer engagements and some incident response and stuff like that. But the majority of my time has been spent on 800-171, and then they came out with this thing called CMMC, which wasn't well understood and probably still isn't. CMMC is a household name, right? I would say most people know what that name. They can, have some name recognition there. However, the security requirements come from something called NIST 800-171. And if you go back into the DFARS contractual rules, DFARS 252-204-7012 specifically, they required the implementation no later than December 31st of 2017. So a lot of folks, I honestly, I don't know if people are looking at all of these. I mean, it would be difficult to with all of those references and contractual clauses and stuff like that. But it's something that folks need to be aware of, is that when you get a contract with DoD, and if they have that DFAR 7012 clause, you're supposed to be accounting for all of these cybersecurity requirements. From a document called NIST 800-171. Well, what the DoD learned is that self-attestation does not work. The companies,
well, it's just like the companies are just like the government, right? When you're going through that ATO process, depending on who you get, they're going to have a different opinion, because there's some subjectivity in some of the, just like a government RFP or proposal. When you're writing something like that, there's some subjectivity, in some cases a lot of subjectivity, in some cases less. But so now it depends on the person, right? So if you have a company that's going through that self-attestation process, right, it really depends on who is doing that. And and depending on what their risk aversion sounds like, so how much they actually know about the topic. There are so many things that can come into play there. And CMMC is actually not required right now, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. They're going through their rulemaking process right now, and that will impact DFARS 252-204-7021. There are a few other clauses that are in fact that regard contractor cybersecurity for the DoD, but 7021 is the one that's going to be impacted by the rulemaking process. And so what's going on right now is, like I said, they're in rulemaking, and if they release a proposed rule, what will happen is likely we'll see CMMC requirements and contracts probably next year in 2024. If we get an interim final rule, we'll probably see it contracts requiring CMMC certification or compliance this year. But and so I think a lot of companies are just kind of putting everything on hold.
They are. I think you're right. They probably shouldn't be.
Yes,
but there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into something like CMMC, right?
Yes.
And, well, where am I going with this, right? It's a tremendous amount of work. It's not required yet. You also have businesses that have been authorized by the government to do some of these CMMC assessments, right? These third-party assessments, right? Let's talk about that as I kind of formulate my thought. I have a path I want to go down, but I think we need to talk about everything first.
Sure. So let me get there. We have so in addition to 7012 requiring the implementation of the security controls that CMMC will bring in a third party to assess, you have a few other clauses. You have DFARS 252-204-7019, and that requires the company to submit a score into a system called SPRS, or some people call it SPRS, the Supplier Performance Risk System, or something like that. And they're trying to reduce some of the subjectivity that goes along with an assessment. So they assign points to the controls, and you submit your score. The calculation doesn't make any sense, but I don't know who came up with the math. But you start with a negative number. It's kind of weird.
Probably a committee.
Exactly. So a lot of folks are actually submitting negative scores, which sounds really bad, but whatever. So and then you have another clause, which this is interesting, DFARS 252-204-7020. And what this one does is if you have a contract with that clause, what you're saying is, okay, government, at any time you can give me a ring and tell me that you are coming to assess me even before CMMC begins. There's a government organization out of the DCMA, the Defense Contract Management Agency, and called the DIBCAC, and they have been conducting these assessments of organizations for, I don't know how long, maybe a year or two, longer than a year, but maybe 2 years, maybe a little longer than that. And so a lot of folks, they don't know that could happen. So if you have all these contractual clauses in your contracts, you really need to be up to par and doing your best to meet these requirements. There's a few.
Let's pause for a second, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking about the business owner. Maybe they have a software technology, they're not a cybersecurity. They probably have smoke pouring out of their ears right now, listening to all of the requirements that they're going to have to meet to sell anything to the government. Maybe even questioning if they should be even involved with the process, right? So when we're thinking about this, and I'm sure you're going to get to it because we know you have training, but there are people that can help them, right? So do you, as a company that's listening to this, maybe they're in the development process right now and they're trying to figure out what they're doing. Mm-hmm. What's a good approach for them to take so they don't get caught by surprise when they're trying to win a government contract and now all of these controls are there? Or have you seen, have you worked with a company that's developing something and either help them or seen a best practice for them to take all of this into account as they're developing their solution?
Yes. There are some really great companies out there. If you go on a website, I believe it's, if you Google CyberAB, it's CyberAB.org. There's a marketplace full of consultants who have been certified, who can assist you to get to where you need to be.
Are you one of these consultants?
I'm not.
Okay. Is Corin one of these consultants?
I don't know if she's a consultant, but she's an assessor.
Corin, I know Corin has, whatever you need to work with a business to get in there. So she's an assessor. Are you an assessor?
I'm not.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's not your gig right now, because I know you're
that's right.
hustle. And we're going to get to that, but I just want to be clear with everybody, what you're, because you're obviously extremely knowledgeable. You know what you're doing, and you have a lot of experience. Mm-hmm. You're also not trying to sell those services yourself, right? So it's not right now. We're just informing everybody of the process. So
right.
But in your opinion, your professional opinion, going and finding one of these companies that you just talked about is probably a good idea. Getting a consultation maybe on what you're doing, getting you going in the right direction.
I think one of the best companies out there, and they have so much content, so much free content, is Summit 7. I would take a serious look at them, take a serious look at their content, if nothing else, because they have excellent information, a lot of podcasts, a lot of just excellent information. I feel like they're a great trusted source.
Okay, great. And then people can check out the Corin Wise episode when she was on. I interviewed her. We talked about this a little bit. Yes. And I think she has services that she offers that would also align with this. And they can also check out L2 Cyber Solutions. That was, I'm not sure yet when this episode is going to come out, but I had them on recently, and they also are involved with the CMMC. She's Lisa Love and her entire team are extremely knowledgeable. So,
okay,
awesome. Just a couple other options for everyone. So, all right, man. So let's keep going here, because this is leading up to something, right? It's kind of leading up to you're calling it a side hustle, but one of the reasons I reached out to you and wanted you on the podcast is because I looked at your training and it's done very, very well. And if you can explain it to someone like me, then you can explain it to anybody. If I can get it, anyone can get it. So I really like that. So I want to jump in and make sure we talk a little bit about your training right now, where people can find it, how it can help them.
Yeah. So the platform is called GRC Academy. grcacademy.io is the website. And the training, as I said at the beginning, it goes through, gives you a great overview and understanding of NIST 800-171, the DFARS contractual clause that I just spoke about. There's also a FAR clause that applies as well. And just tries to give you that understanding, that groundwork, so that you're not trusting blindly in a consultant and hoping that everything will be okay once you get to your certification.
Sure.
So that's been the entire goal of that. There are some things I would like to qualify here, though, based on my previous statements about the contractual clauses. You only have to apply NIST 800-171 if you have systems that process, store, or I can't remember the other one. Sorry.
That's fine.
Controlled and classified information.
Gotcha.
So if you don't have CUI, NIST 800-171 doesn't apply to you. Now, the caveat is that everyone has what's called federal contract information. When you get awarded a government contract, your contract is considered federal contract information, FCI, and the acronym is FCI. So CMMC level 1 what that does is it has a set of 17 requirements that is basically come from NIST 800-171, and you have to account for those. If you have CUI, you have to account for CMMC level 2, which is all of the 110 controls from NIST 800-171. And I would say probably 3 to 6 months for CMMC level 1. I mean, it's just a wild guess, because there's a lot of variables there. I've seen estimates for 0 to hero, I would say for CMMC level 2, we're probably looking at 12 to 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a big investment, a lot of work. So my course can give you that basic understanding, the knowledge, and save you a lot of time poking around on the internet.
And
less than 3 hours. So
that's one of the things I like about it. So I think one of the things that me and you are talking about doing is taking an overview of this topic, putting it into our academy. So anyone that's a member there and is going through our courses, they can take a look at it. But I also like this as a reference where people could just go to your site, and because the course is relatively inexpensive in the big scheme of things. So you can go on there and you can check out, you can get this overview, and in the way that you present the material is I don't want to say it's simple because you cover technical details, but you do it in a way where you can understand what needs to be done, what all of these terms mean, what you need to be thinking about as a business owner or somebody that works in the business that's going to be doing some of this work. It's a great starting point to know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Right. And I think that is one of the real values of what you're doing here.
Yeah, thank you. And the other thing I'd point out is that they're bite-sized lectures. So 3 to 5 minutes is the norm. Yep. 9 minutes is quite a long one, but the thing I like about that is it's not a 1 hour lecture, and you got to find that one point where I talked about this particular topic. Very easy to go back and refresh if you need to.
Yeah, companies there's a lot of different for the non-cybersecurity guys out there, right? There are a lot of different hoops that companies are talking about, and they're almost these terms are passed around with limited knowledge, I would say, myself included, right? But some of the terms that you hear all the time are CMMC, ATO, FedRAMP, right? FedRAMP process.
Yes.
You hear also about the Air Force and the different services have different platforms that you can go through, that you can kind of put your business in, and like software development platforms and different ways to work and develop software under a government curtain, I guess, where you're kind of putting controls in, whether we're talking about cloud-based or on-prem. So this is one of the hottest things people are talking about. And look, especially if you're on contract with the government. And this is where I start wondering, right? So you have a lot of companies that are on contract with the government. They have these software suites that are already hooked up.
Yes.
Equipment that's hooked up, and these controls on the CMMC process hasn't happened, right? They probably struggle to actually put all of that into place. So, the government usually grandfathers people in and gives them, especially if it's a mission critical need, right? But there's a lot of unknown there. So just waiting and hoping it's not going away. Like, this stuff's not going away. Eventually it's going to be here. So you really got to start thinking about it and working on it now.
Yes. And everyone involved with the DoD, except when they buy software, those don't have any CMMC requirements for the acquisition of software. But for everyone else, including landscapers, including your janitors and all those folks, they'll need to be either CMMC level 1 compliant or CMMC level 2 certified.
Whoa. Explain this to me, right? So what does the landscaping company that doesn't have any applications or anything, they just have lawnmowers, right? So what do they have to do to be CMMC compliant?
So level 1, those 17 controls to protect federal contract information.
Okay.
They're pretty basic, but I mean, basic to me is very difficult for others because if they don't have any IT expertise, they'll have to hire someone.
Can you give me an example of a couple of those controls?
Sure. So I have a Control Explorer on GRC Academy that I'll pull up really quick here. Just one moment. and I'll filter to the level 1 controls. So an example would be verify and control limit connections to and the use of external information systems. And so what that means is you can't just connect every little thing. You need to understand what you're connecting to and limit to just what, ideally what's needed.
And that's because you have a federal contract. Maybe you have a signed contract on your laptop, which is probably where most companies have it, right? It's in their laptop. Maybe it's in a hard drive somewhere.
Yes. They also have some physical security, basic physical security controls, escort visitors, monitor visitor activity. I know a big concern of the government in general is contractors because they, it's easier to compromise a contractor than it is the government network. Sure. So that would be a way in. So it's, I joked a little bit in that, the DoD, their trash is just going to be piled up. Their lawns are not going to be mowed, and it's going to be a mess. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because the DoD really could impact the supply chain. However, we had foreign adversaries that are after us, so we have to do something.
That's true. And I'm sure this is just me having a lack of understanding, I guess. But when we talk about, I think you called it FCI.
Yes.
Talking about FCI, like all public sector information, like contracting information, for the most part, there's some classified examples where this isn't the case, but for the most part, it's public, right? Like I can go in right now. I've got a variety of tools I can go to.
Yes.
Tell you every single contract that a company has won, and I can see exactly. And there's hundreds of pieces of information associated with these contracts that are published, and then you can actually request the contract from anyone. They don't have to give it to you, but you can. There's a mechanism for you to request. Like if I want a contract with the government, I can request that. And as a citizen of the United States, and really why the FAR exists. I mean, this goes back to the revolution, which is preventing things like profiteering, ensuring transparency, all of that. That's why we get that. So I wonder how this is going to impact that availability of data.
Yeah, that's it. Very interesting. I'm not exactly sure. The applicable FAR clause is FAR 52.204-21, and it talks about basic safeguarding of covered contractor information systems. And you'll see the federal contract information defined there.
I wonder if, sorry, not to cut you off.
No problem.
Getting to this, but I wonder if a lot of that information is stuff that wouldn't be publicly available or would be redacted anyway. Like, you talk about like PII, for instance, right? Sure. So I'm not going to see your social security number when I go looking up your business contracts online, right? So there's going to be some things that I'm not seeing. So I wonder if it's just going to maybe limit some of the data they would consider.
Yeah, and some examples I've seen is programmatic charts, and there's some associated stuff that comes along with that. Now, the one thing I will say is that it's interesting because the government. I was given an example by a person who was in a meeting with a military guy, and he said that, well, even if you bring porta potties, you're going to have to be CMMC level 2 certified because we have a map that we give to you, and it has CUI on it. And so the government is not going to, they may make poor decisions, and they may just not be able to get a contractor. So that's something to consider for future plans for contractors, because a lot of them say, okay, I'll just go level 1. That'll be sufficient. But we don't know how many level 1 contracts there truly will be. So it's going to be a big, I think it'll be a partner differentiator as well for partnering. Because if there's a CMMC level 2 contract and you have a prime, they may want to see all of their subs be CMMC level 2, especially the big primes, because they might view it as a risk to have a CMMC level 1 partner, even if they won't receive CUI. What if they do? Then we have an incident. We have to respond. It takes time. Could cause problems. So it's big considerations.
Yeah, it's Alexa off. That's my Alexa telling us that you have an appointment coming up. Alexa off. I don't know if anyone else listening lives their life by Alexa, but I have alarms and reminders and everything else that go off all day that keep me on track. And I've also been told, I've had cybersecurity people on here, like, why are you using that? Alexa is listening, recording everything that you're saying, and your entire life is on there. So that
Yes.
that may be true. But what is true is that that alarm was accurate. So we're coming to a close here, and I know we could probably talk for a couple more hours about this. Here's what I know is that it's a hard problem, and you have a great understanding of this, and you understand the problem, and you can provide a solution and definitely some training.
Yes.
And that's a great place to be at. If you understand a hard to solve problem, then that makes you sought after. And so people are going to be seeking after your knowledge and wisdom. Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Jacob Hill. Just search for me there. We'll probably have a link in the description. GRCacademy.io is the platform that we've been discussing with the CMMC course. Take a look at that. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, cool, man. Thanks for coming on. For those in the academy, they're probably going to start seeing you in the academy a little bit here.
Yeah.
I'll have our video recording of this in our academy. But as far as the podcast is concerned, for all our listeners out there, I'm going to have all of the links in the notes pages of whatever platform you're listening to this on, iTunes, whatever. Make sure you like this episode because, Jacob spent a long time here describing CMMC, and it helps us. Leave a review. Tell us how awesome Jacob is. We want to hear it. Go to his website, get his course. You can always go to our website at dodcontract.com and hook up with Jacob there too. Love having you on the show. Probably the first of many. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it. Have a good one.
All right. Take care, everyone. See you next week.
All right.